One day, we'll wake up and realize that everything around us is perfectly designed. The signs in our neighborhood have impeccable typography. Every poster, every product package, every Instagram ad looks like it was made by an award-winning art director. All book covers are stunning. Faces are symmetrical. Teeth perfectly white. People are fit, not from discipline, but from Ozempic. Machines will understand color theory, cinematic rhythm, semiotic balance, and psychological persuasion better than any of us ever could. Everything polished, optimized, enhanced. And in this world of flawless beauty and hyper design, the only thing left with any soul will be the mistake, the typo, the glitch, the off-key note, the ugly cover, the awkward silence, the broken brushstroke. The era of artificial creativity will not be defeated by more perfection. It will be overwhelmed by the raw, the failed, the accidental, by what we once dismissed as bad. In this video, we're going to explore how design, psychology, philosophy, and art history all point toward the same future, a return to error, to raw expression, to things so wrong they become sacred. In 2012, in the small Spanish town of Borja, an elderly woman named Cecilia Jimenez tried to restore a deteriorating fresco of Jesus in her local church. She wasn't a trained restorer, she did it out of devotion, and she failed spectacularly. The face of Christ became what the internet soon dubbed Eximono, behold the monkey. Critics and restorers were horrified, but the world was captivated. Tourists flooded the town. The failed painting became more famous than the original. It spawned memes, merchandise, documentaries. What was supposed to be a disaster became a cultural event. Why? Because the error was authentic, emotional, human. It was the opposite of the polished digital rendering that saturate our feeds. It reminded people that art is not about technical mastery alone. It's about intention, failure, vulnerability. The Exi Homo incident became a parable of our time. When everything is sleek and correct, the wrong thing becomes a beacon. This is not new. Throughout history, mistakes have often birthed new movements. In Japanese aesthetics, there's a concept called wabi-sabi. It embraces the imperfect, the impermanent, the incomplete. A cracked bowl repaired with gold, a weathered wood beam, a face with wrinkles. Wabi-sabi is the antithesis of perfection, yet it's revered as beauty. Now jump to 1965. The Beatles release Rubber Soul. It's a psychedelic, soulful, strange album, but the cover? A distorted stretch photo. The story goes, the photo was projected onto a piece of cardboard, and the board slipped. The band liked the result and kept it. That accident became one of the most iconic covers in music history. Designers try to replicate these accidents now. But the irony is, when you aim for imperfection, it's no longer a mistake. It's a style, a strategy. Authentic error resists reproduction. That's why it feels so powerful when it happens. In a world driven by AI and perfection, accidents like these become revolutionary. The value of the error in art and design has deep roots in philosophy and aesthetics. In The Invisible Dragon, Dave Hickey argues that beauty is often political, used to control taste and reinforce elite standards. When something is badly made, it resists those standards. It screams freedom. Willem Flusser, in his essay, The Gesture of Making, points out that true creation often comes from deviation, the moment where intention fails and chance interferes. That interruption is not a bug, but the soul of the work. And then there's Paul Virilio's theory of the integral accident, that every new technology brings with it its own disaster. The train created the train wreck. Photoshop created the grotesque digital fail. AI-generated beauty then creates a counter-aesthetic. Glitch, failure, error. In this framework, the DIY artist isn't behind. They're ahead, rejecting the tyranny of optimization. Let's rewind. In medieval Europe, ugly wasn't merely undesirable, it was morally suspect. Beauty was divine, and anything outside of classical symmetry was associated with sin or chaos. But by the time we hit the Renaissance and Baroque periods, the grotesque creeps in, literally. Think Hieronymus Bosch or the monstrous marginalia in illuminated manuscripts. Ugliness started to fascinate. Fast forward to the 19th century, and Charles Baudelaire writes Les Fleurs du Mal, the flowers of evil, elevating the perverse, the artificial, the decaying. He doesn't just accept ugliness, he finds it sublime. This idea grows in modernism. The Dadaists, for instance, deliberately created anti-art, ugly, chaotic, and nonsensical, as a protest against the polished aesthetics of bourgeois culture. By the 20th century, ugliness becomes central to critique. Susan Sontag in Notes on Camp celebrates the theatricality of failed seriousness. What was once ugly becomes stylish in its failure. Punk culture ran with this. Ripped clothes, Xeroxed zines, out-of-tune guitars. It wasn't just rebellion, it was aesthetic philosophy. Today, AI delivers perfection. And so the loop completes. The imperfect, the ugly, the wrong is the only place left for human soul to hide. Luxury has always had a dirty little secret. It feeds on trash. Literally and metaphorically. When Balenciaga releases a sneaker that looks like it was found in a post-apocalyptic landfill for over $1,000, that's not irony. It's strategy. The aesthetics of the ugly, the wrong, the unfinished have become markers of exclusivity. What was once discarded is now fetishized. The so-called primitive African masks that revolutionized Picasso's art. These weren't mistakes. They were outside the Western canon, and that was their power. In the 21st century, this cycle has only accelerated. Designers like Vetements and Maison Margiela showcase clothes that look thrifted, torn, deconstructed. Rick Owens turns emergency blankets into haute couture. The message is clear. What looks poor, broken, or wrong is more desirable because it disrupts the system. Because error has cultural power. And the system wants to own that power before it becomes a threat. The DIY ethic, once a rebellion, is now a branding strategy. In the punk scene of the 1970s, fanzines were photocopied by hand. Album covers were scrawled with Sharpies. Bands like Crass rejected slick production in favor of raw, chaotic recordings. Not because they didn't care, but because the polish was the enemy. It was a rejection of industry standards, professionalism, and corporate aesthetics. Fast forward to today. Billion-dollar brands try to recreate that same spirit. A marketing team spends weeks simulating the look of a spontaneous Instagram story. AI tools generate imperfect brushstrokes, as if the machine was trying to imitate the trembling hand of a nervous teenager in their bedroom making zines in the 90s. We've reached a point where authenticity is a product category, and this raises the question, if corporations can now generate imperfection with precision, where does that leave the real, unpolished, weird stuff? Maybe the only truly radical act left is making something that's not trying to be radical. something naive, broken, cringy, something human. Because as soon as the mainstream can fake the underground needs to mutate again. In an age where perfection is automated, failure becomes a statement. The glitch, once an error, is now a genre. In digital art, the corrupted image, broken pixels, distorted sound, unreadable text has become a language of resistance. It speaks of systems breaking down, of ghosts in the machine, of human presence in a digital world. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han talks about the smoothness of contemporary design, the slick, frictionless surfaces that hide complexity and difference. In contrast, failure reveals the seams. It shows the effort, the struggle, the mess. Take kitsch. Once dismissed as tasteless or lowbrow, it now serves as a celebration of sincere imperfection. The cheap figurine, the overdecorated living room, the melodramatic soap opera, these are honest in their excess. They don't pretend to be tasteful. They don't try to fit into design manuals. In music, lo-fi became an aesthetic, not despite its flaws, but because of them. The hiss of the cassette, the bedroom recording, the missed note, all reminders that someone was there, that someone tried, that it was real. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's a shadow, and shadows are where depth lives. There was a time when the unofficial was synonymous with the undesirable. Bootlegs, fan edits, mixtapes, VHS copies, zines. These things lived in the margins, whispered about, traded, hand to hand, hidden in drawers. But the unofficial now holds a different kind of power. Pirate aesthetics represent a rebellion against polish, against branding, against the sterile control of corporate perfection. Zines, for instance, born from punk and feminist movements, were often photocopied, poorly stapled, and printed on whatever paper was around. But they carried raw truth, urgency, a voice not filtered through advertising or institutional design. In video, artists like Tony Orsler and Ryan Trecarton embraced the degraded image as a tool to challenge sanitized media. There's also the internet native version, deep-fried memes, amateur video essays, YouTube thumbnails with clashing fonts and chaotic layouts. They scream louder than any Apple ad. They say, "This is made by a person, not a brand." In the age of generative AI, where every frame can be high-def, symmetrical, and slick, these imperfections will scream authenticity. The pixelated will become premium. The misspelled will be rare. Pirate will be luxury. Take the music of Oval in the 90s, scratching CDs to make them skip, using errors as compositional tools. Or Ryoji Ikeda, who sculpted sound from digital noise. Glitch music didn't just tolerate malfunction, it celebrated it. In visual art, glitch aesthetics exploded online. Artists like Rosa Menkman theorized glitch as a rupture in expected meaning, a space of criticality. She argued that glitch was not only aesthetic, but political, a way to resist the seamless flow of corporate technology. Data bending, deliberately corrupting code and image files to produce unpredictable results, became a kind of digital punk rock. The accident became intention. The error became voice. In design, glitch fonts and corrupted interfaces started to appear in high fashion, in album covers, even in gallery installations. The visual language of error was co-opted, but its radical potential remains. In an AI-dominated landscape where everything works, the broken will become the only thing that speaks with honesty. In a world where machines master the finish, the human touch becomes sacred, precisely because it's imperfect. The rise of DIY culture, from punk zines to cassette tape labels, outsider art to YouTube tutorial music videos, was never about perfection. It was about voice, immediacy, presence, a crooked line, a warbling melody, a typo on a poster. These were once signs of limitation. They are now badges of authenticity. William Morris and the arts and crafts movement in the 19th century already saw this coming. Industrialization would strip beauty from life unless we reclaimed the handmade. Their rebellion was against the soullessness of mass production. In our case, it's against the soullessness of algorithmic optimization. In the AI age, the artisanal becomes sacred, not because it is rare, but because it cannot be replicated. The cracked voice of Daniel Johnston, the scribbled lyrics of a demo tape, the street poet yelling beneath your window. These will outlast polished Spotify core or mid-journey perfected posters. Error is the new aura. Long before artificial intelligence could generate flawless reproductions or design layouts indistinguishable from human-made works, artists were already rebelling against perfection. Marcel Duchamp, in 1917, submitted a urinal to an art exhibition and called it Fountain. It wasn't a joke, it was a declaration. The ready-made was born. Art could now be anything, and more importantly, it could be chosen, not created. The Dadaist used absurdity as a weapon. The Surrealists weaponized the unconscious. And later, Arte Povera in Italy used trash, dirt, sticks, cheap materials, not out of poverty, but to challenge the bourgeois understanding of beauty and value. Artists like Michelangelo Pistoletto and Yanis Kaunelis took scrap and turned it into gallery work, asking, who decides what's worthy? Barbara Kruger, with later collage, found imagery with provocative text in anti-commercial acts that the advertising world would eventually plagiarize. All of this points to a long history where the error, the trash, and the imperfect were always rich soil for disruption. What we see now, the rise of glitch art, lo-fi music, and the broken aesthetics online, it's not new. It's the continuation of a deeper tradition, the refusal to conform, the refusal to let algorithms decide what's good. The perfectly symmetrical faces, it all starts to blur together. And in that blur, the glitch will shine. The misprint will matter. The garbage will become sacred. We'll look for voices with tremors, singers who miss notes, images with digital noise, books that don't make sense, TV shows that were never meant to leave their hometowns. Because in that chaos, there's a heartbeat, a reminder that we're still human. If this resonated with you, share it, leave a comment, and maybe dig through some digital trash. You might just find gold.